Remember, I'm not going to have a one-way conversation. It's not fair. So one thing that is different between government accounting and for-profit accounting is, it's the size of the organization. It is, in a way, the complexity of their work. So this is somewhat different from the previous, from everything you've been doing so far. You've been doing like AIS, right? A lot of it includes machine learning, statistical modeling, and all these things. In your work also you do financial accounting, which deals mostly with the fact that the company and how they report it to their stakeholders, to their shareholders and stuff. Today we will talk about government reporting. Okay? So, oops, that's not the right place. I like this show. How many of you actually watch this show? Okay, if you're watching this show, that means you're not working hard enough.
No correct answer.
Although I do understand. You know what's the worst thing about this show? I love it. One time we were watching it, my wife and I were watching this one, and I actually understood what Sheldon Cooper was saying. And I told my wife, you know what he's saying now? This is what we do in our research. And my wife, she said, don't tell anyone that, because this is really, really embarrassing. This is like talk of being a nerd or something like that. Like if you understand what Sheldon Cooper is saying, then you're a real nerd. And I'm not supposed to brag about it. So I'm not bragging about it. I'm just making a note. This is like kind of clarifying the fact that I am a nerd. Oh, come on, it's not that bad. Got me the job. Now, so to start with, we're talking about government reporting. Let's start from the beginning. How is it different? What's the difference between government entities and for-profit organizations? Come on, first thing that comes to mind, what?
So, the government is not a for-profit thing. It's mostly concerned with helping the people and enhancing welfare in society.
So it's the purpose of their work, right? So it's their objective. The government's objective is to provide services. It's not to make money. Governments, they don't make money from like business, etc. In many cases, they actually subsidize the product. What does it mean? It means that they buy it at higher price than they actually sell it. Why? To help the citizens. So their main objective is to provide services. What about for-profit companies? What's their objective? Make money. Right? This is their objective, it's to make money. What else? Source of capital. So what's the source of capital when it comes to for-profit? For-profit, so a company.
Yeah, the shareholders or the lenders.
Okay, so it could be taking loans, like debts, or it could be investments, or from sales. And they're like regular business operations, right? This is how they generate money. What about the government? Tax. So it's mostly tax. And what's the main difference between those two types of revenues?
Tax is compulsory.
Exactly. You have to pay taxes whether you like it or not. No one likes to pay taxes. I mean, come on, who likes to pay taxes? When it's tax season, I start crying. When I see the cut in my paycheck, what I actually like, when officially what my salary is, and then what it actually comes up to at the end of the check. The difference is huge. Makes me want to cry. Yes?
Aren't there tolls also that you should include in that package as well besides taxes?
Yes, so it's tolls and taxes. Okay? So it's basically tolls and taxes. The other type of money that the governments can get are grants. This is, for example, when a municipality gets grants from the federal government or from when Rutgers gets state funding. This is why we're suffering at Rutgers, because we had a huge budget cuts, right? So we had a lot of grants that stopped because of the crisis. Now, do you guys remember Friends, TV show Friends? Come on, you have to know Friends. Friends is the best TV sitcom ever, in my opinion. And in one of the episodes, you have Rachel. Yeah, I watch a lot of sitcoms, so don't judge. It's the only thing that I watch because it's 20 minutes, so when I take a break and watch something for 20 minutes, that's okay, that's acceptable. I haven't watched a movie for years, basically. Except cartoon movies with the kids. Again, I watch a lot of cartoons. But Rachel, she got her first paycheck, and she was so happy. She was like, I got my first paycheck, and she looked at it, and it's totally not worth it. And who's this FICA guy who's taking all my money? So basically, she started actually seeing how taxes get. She did not have an option. You had to pay those taxes. Okay, so now it's the objective. It's a source of revenues. What else? We talked about one of them is mandatory. This is the government. So for government accounting, you don't have the option of not paying taxes. You don't have the option of not being like a citizen or someone who's living, basically belonging to government, right? What about companies? It's voluntary. If you don't want to, as stakeholder, as shareholder, you have the right to whether invest or not, right? No one can force you to invest in certain, in any company. What else?
Another difference, I guess, is that the accounting basis. For-profit companies are recorded based on accrual basis, but governmental accounting is recorded based on, at least as far as I know, based on cash basis in China.
Sure. They call it also modified accrual because it's mostly cash based. Okay, so that's true. So it's the difference in the accounting basis. So companies, they report their accounting based on accrual, based on the accrual basis of accounting, right? Whereas governments, they usually follow modified accrual. Now, this is, and we talk about government and accounting in the US, or specifically when you talk about it, you also see a challenge, which is the sovereignty of the state. Every state is a sovereign state, right? So what does it mean? Every state has the right to issue their own laws. So when a municipality is filing, when the municipality is filing, requiring it, when a municipality is filing a certain report to the state has the right to decide on what accounting principles to follow, whether it is GAAP or not. So the GASB does not have the right to, or the authority, does not have the authority to require a certain standardized reporting format. With companies, you have the SEC for all publicly traded companies. The SEC, they have some clear requirements for reporting. Those apply to all publicly traded companies, right? Whereas in the states, it depends on where you are. Every state is a sovereign state. So basically, when you think about the difference between government accounting and for-profit accounting, yes?
Is that still the case? If you're like a municipality and you're getting federal funding, don't you also have to follow federal regulations?
Well, this is the thing. You have to file and you have to report to the state and to the federal government. Now, the federal government, this is across the US. So the federal government is across the US. This is another thing. Reporting in government, for government entities is redundant. What does it mean? Sometimes you have to file multiple reports. More or less similar reports. When you file for the federal government. This is different from what. So in this case, the federal government has the authority to require it across the board. But for state reporting, this is totally different. Every state is sovereign. Like for example, here we don't follow GAAP in New Jersey. It's also like, for example, how state taxes, etc., they change from one state to the other, right? Now, another thing is the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders when you're talking about companies? Investors, right? Management. Anyway, sometimes the basically regulatory boards, the SEC can get involved. What about, and also of course, creditors? What about the government? You have citizens. You have policymakers. You have legislators. You have analysts. If in municipalities, usually bonds. So there are certain issues where they are similar, but there are also certain issues where they are different. Another thing is basically the life of a government. You don't expect the government to go bankrupt. And we know that sometimes they, like Detroit filed, for example, for bankruptcy. However, it's not like when they go bankrupt like a company which is totally liquidated. You're not going to end up, Detroit cannot end up without the government. Someone has to govern. This is why the federal government or someone else will, basically the federal government or the state, they would jump in and actually help. Yes?
Good example of Atlantic City, because all their revenues, their tax revenues is based on gambling, the hotel fees and everything. Over the last couple of years, it's gone on gambling. Other states now legalize gambling. More people are gambling now in Atlantic City. So now their tax base is down by 50%. So they actually filed for bankruptcy, and they were looking for the state of New Jersey to lend them money or bail them out, but they, like I said, New Jersey didn't agree to the budget they submitted. So now New Jersey's taking over Atlantic City. They have appointed treasurer who's running the city right now. So they didn't basically go bankrupt, they did, in a sense.
So basically the current administration would go bankrupt.
Right.
But the municipality or the city itself cannot go bankrupt. There's a difference.
Right.
Whereas a company, if they go bankrupt, this is it. Like they can be liquidated. There's also, again, with governments, you have less likelihood of bankruptcy than companies. The competition is less. Yes, please.
Did you mention that the state governments and also local municipalities, generally speaking, they have to meet their budgets?
Exactly.
Within the budgets.
Exactly. So you have also budgetary obligations. You have all these things. So you have, this is where the stakeholders are different, because they have to answer to someone as well. In this case, it's not just the citizen. They don't just answer to the citizen. They have like the governing bodies and the rule-making bodies for the government are slightly different. There's also the fact of the performance audit. Companies, they have financial audits, right? What does it mean? So what we care about for a company is how much money they are making, and are the financial statements correctly or fairly representing the financial situation of the company. That's what's about when it comes to auditing auditing companies, right? With government, you don't just audit their numbers, because it's not about the money only. It's about the services. So even if their numbers are very good, but they have very bad services, what do? This is what we call performance audit. Are the funds spent efficiently? What's the quality of service that they are providing? This is a lot more complicated in a way. It includes a lot of judgment, etc. And running or conducting performance audits is peculiar and is only for governments that this happens. Yes?
So this might seem odd, but if the goal is not to make a profit, and so even if there is a loss, it is in some way acceptable. So doesn't that sort of incentivize some kind of financial fraud in the government? Because even if you do a fraud, your numbers are low, but nobody actually cares so much
It's
about
not, no,
numbers.
that's not what we're saying. It's not that no one actually cares. You do not expect the government to make profits, but you also do not want the government to be losing money for a long time. Why? Because remember that there are pensions as well. So in New Jersey, we have a problem with unfunded pensions.
Every state.
Sorry?
Every state.
Every state, but he would have it like very bad. He would have it very bad in New Jersey. The problem, I think it's like, what was it last year? $16 billion or something like that.
That's off the books because they don't, in government accounting, since it's balanced budget, you can't show, it's not accrual based, so you're not showing that it was debts as being part of the budget. It's strictly a cash flow basis almost.
And they keep deferring it for later on. But what happens when the number gets so high that the government cannot pay? So if I retire later on, the government cannot pay me my pension. What happens? So that's one of the problems. This is why you don't want them, and this is why they care about not having deficits.
Yeah, and then, a lot of times the governments, like New Jersey, last year Christie borrowed money from a supposedly locked teacher pension fund to pay off, like, to balance the budget. And these are the kind of gimmicks that go on all the time, every year. In fact, the same.
We had a seminar about that.
Yeah.
We had like one of the visitors. Who was it? Angela Gore?
Yes, but the Volcker Alliance, which Hussein and I are working with right now, the
Yeah.
foundation run by Paul Volcker, used to be Treasury Secretary,
He was the chairman.
investigates
Former
all
chairman of the
debt, yeah.
Of the Reserve, right?
Chairman of the Federal Reserve, yes.
Yeah.
But they're investigating now how all the state governments have these little gimmicks and shenanigans they play to balance the budgets, and how it's tied in with their financial health.
So they have to meet their budget, right? And if they cannot actually meet it in the normal way, they kind of shuffle the funds from one place to the other. They have this
Yeah.
flexibility sometimes, and in this case, remember that sometimes even like when they borrow money, they report it sometimes as revenue.
Right.
So it's kind of complicated. It's not like in the same way that like a debt is a debt. So if they push it further away, it's much more complicated. Yes, Chief?
So are the regulations on governmental accounting more strict than for-profit classic accounting?
More complicated. I wouldn't say more strict. I would say more complicated. So they have more compliance stuff. For example, a municipality will have to do. They have additional performance and stuff. So accountability. This is where we get to accountability. The control is made by accountable. So if you if you are in office of Newark City, and you don't do a good job, you are held accountable. Even if you're not stealing money,
Yeah.
they will simply not elect you next time. You lose your place as mayor.
But also, like,
So there's politics involved in it.
answer the question, like, public companies, they've gone public. They've gone through the whole vetting process of filing, 6-month filing, and they ran through the SEC every year. So there's a certain size involved with that. Those companies that have the financial health and the size to be able to do this kind of reporting and compliance, right, with GAAP reporting. Now, this government's like, you have a small little town, like where I live, maybe some of those small municipalities here in this state, they have to follow the same county standards as, or the same county practices as City of Newark. So small versus large.
And they have to follow the same rules more or
Right.
less. And there's also a problem. I remember in one of the projects that we ran, actually one of my previous master's students was telling me in their city they cannot afford to hire a person who can prepare their financial statements, for example.
Right.
They are so small that they can't afford to hire someone like that or to hire an IT person. So what they do is they actually outsource it to the neighboring city.
Right.
In many cases, you see that a lot.
And nowadays you do, they share fire departments, they share police stations.
You remember that
Yeah.
Hugh Trump. So
Yeah.
Hugh, one of the guys, and we'll talk about that later on. But for example, what he did, he actually analyzed how much it would cost if they use their police dispatch from their city as opposed to the county. Because sometimes they cannot afford to hire full-time, let's say fire department people, etc. They might actually get people from the county. So it's kind of complicated. And with the companies, you don't expect, for example, Procter & Gamble to go to HP or something like that and kind of borrow their IT auditors. They won't do that. They will hire their own. And when they hire a company and when they outsource it, they actually pay for a company as if they are like for in a total different way. Whereas here they kind of sometimes they collaborate. They do a lot of collaboration between those ones when they get at smaller entities.
So the question comes from this concern. If you're a for-profit company, your stakeholders, if they're investing in your company, must have some basic knowledge of finance or the ability to look at financial statements and discern better companies versus worse companies because they have the freedom of choice. But the stakeholders in a governmental setting are presumably less educated because everyone's a stakeholder, even the people that can't afford to invest. They have to pay taxes in their stakeholders.
Yes.
So why does it seem, from what you're telling me, that the government allows the governmental accounting people to play more games and do this kind of like balanced budget smoothing?
It's not like that.
Is it
We did
because
not
like
say
they're
that.
the ones in charge
We
and
did
they
not
want
say
to
that
do it?
in this
Or?
way.
Well,
It's just the accounting basis is different. So there are no clear rules, and there are no standardized standards across entities, across basically states. So this is one thing that can complicate things. But they do file more reports, so they have to file and have more reports.
But it's
Each
one thing to file a lot of reports. Do the reports actually tell you the information you want to know? Like, for example, if they're taking out of the pension funds, do you have to do extreme digging to find that information out, or is it made clear to you in the report
if
when
you
you
can
first look at
understand
it?
it,
If you can understand
it, then you would
Then it would be
see
clear.
But like that's half the challenge, digging it out of the financial statements.
And this is where actually
Yeah.
our research come into play. This is what actually our research is about. Denise, Steve, and I are working on 2 papers that actually address that specific issue, the complexity and the lack of clarity, if you want to call it, in government reporting.
But does this come from the fact that the people that should be held accountable are the same people that get to make the rules?
No, they're not.
Well, they're not the same
They're not the
people,
same
but-
people. They're not the same people.
But it's very hard to lose your job in government unless you're elected or a political appointment, they call it. It's very hard to lose your position, particularly once, whether it's state or federal.
But
Yeah.
remember one thing, which is they are also most of the time, most of these entities, they don't have a lot of resources. The money that they get, they are expected to spend it on services. So it's not like, for example, so it's all about priority. Is their priority to shovel snow, or is their priority to provide medical care for those who cannot afford it? So all these things, they actually play a role. It makes it more difficult. So in many cases, you have a judgment call. So for example, are they going to spend them? They have the funds. Are they going to keep it for? They have general funds and they have special funds. So basically, are they going to use it for example, the police department or the fire department, or do they prefer to use it for I don't know, some other type of safety? Yes.
I mean, a lot of times you have a budget crisis where they're looking at maybe have to raise taxes or something, where there's going to be a budget tight, like they're going to lose some money in their budget next year. They'll choose selectively cut back on services that citizens feel at first, like fire department, snow removal, so that people feel upset and affected by it. They say, okay, pass the taxes, or they'll complain. So they have a choice. They could go to the pensions. They don't do pensions. They'll do something first, like snow removal.
Sometimes they have to deal with unions as well. All these things they have to get.
But the people making these decisions, for the most part, like mayors and things like that, they're elected officials.
Right.
So they have incentive to show the public they have incentive to hide these little tricks in the budget and show the public a more balanced budget. Look at what I'm doing, these wonderful things. They may not point out the fact that some of this money's coming from, like you said, a pension fund or something like
Yeah,
that.
Chris is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
And aren't they also the same people that get, so I understand it's not the mayor that gets to choose the regulations, but it's still people within the state senate that are other elected officials within the same party.
Oh, that's totally
that
different
have-
story. That's totally different story. Now we get to the legislation part. This is kind of beyond the scope of this lecture. However, when you talk about how the rules in each state or how the regulations in each state are actually created, that's a totally different story. That has a lot of politics involved. Remember that this becomes a very political issue. It's not at this point an accounting issue anymore. So there are certain things that actually, like for example, pension and even though pension and other tax rates and stuff like that, in many cases, the decision is more political than actually economic. It's who is in office. That makes a big difference. And those things, they are not the same way as in company. Companies' objectives are the same. So those are like, according to Gatsby, those are basically part of the stakeholders. Yes.
So what does Gatsby stand for? Government Accounting Securities Board?
No, standards board.
Standards.
But the difference between FASB and Gatsby, by the way, their offices are not right by each other. They are actually like right by each other on the same floor.
Across the hallway from each other.
Yeah. We've actually visited Gatsby several times, and we have one of the people in Gatsby actually works for our government accounting master's program, DE. And so this is actually the difference is that they are more, they can come up with standards, and most of the time it's more, how do you say, like advisory, you want to say? Like it's recommended. Best practices. But for example, the state can choose not to follow their recommendation.
Why should the government have a different standard of accounting in the first place?
Because they are different. So it's the objective. Like for example, for profit, we just mentioned it before. For profit, the objective is to make money, not to lose. Whereas for government, it doesn't make any sense to have it the same way. Why? Because you also care about the quality of service. You have like other stuff that you will not have, you won't have to deal with when you talk about for-profit. So if you are going to use for-profit standards for the government, what about you cannot measure the quality of service. And if you do it the other way around, then you are adding a burden on the companies because who cares about their service? If you hire a plumber and he does a bad job, you won't hire him next time. But you cannot actually force him to provide a certain high quality work.
I think that it's more like they're cash flow based, and it's like the cash flow statements of the companies, because governments obviously consider X dollars per year, and they have to stay within a spending amount. And the only way to do the performance measurement is to see the actual cash spent versus services provided. And there's recommended benchmarks, percentages, and there should be like established standards for every service type, but sometimes there isn't. Often there isn't.
So this is actually like the questions that you mentioned about like how these change or why does the government allow for that. We try to answer them in our papers. Now, that's Denise.
Yeah.
So this is Denise Isa. You should know by now that that's my last name. And Kozlowski is Steve, who graduated last year. Okay. So now he works in nonprofit and in government. Now, again, the motivation about this paper, it started with the Data Act. The Data Act was a law that passed in 2014, which required recipients of federal grants, okay, to start reporting. So it actually does not require recipients. It's so that the reportings for federal spendings would go to a specific website, and that it would be reported in a machine readable format, basically an XBRL. Are you guys familiar with XBRL? We'll talk about it slightly later on. Just good. So this law, the idea behind it was to have data in an accessible format. Why is that? So how many of you actually downloaded financial statements for companies? In which format do you download them? Sorry? HTML. Yeah. Excel. You can also download the data. I'm not talking about just the financial statement as a document. It's also the data from it. You can download it as HTML, as Excel, as PDF. You can also download it as XBRL, which is similar to HTML but for business specifically. It provides some kind of level of hierarchy. The Data Act, the main idea was to provide better accountability. It's the Digital Accountability and Transparency Act. Why? Currently, government reportings are in PDF. Now, what's the problem with PDF? It's not machine readable. In many cases, they are actually scanned copies of PDF. What does it mean, scanned copy? You can't even search for a word. So if you have the financial statement is like 300 pages, what do you expect to have? 300 pages if you are looking for a specific item, unless you know exactly where it is found, you have to go through 300 pages. Okay, that might be okay if you are looking for that one only for one entity. What if you wanted to compare Newark to New Brunswick? Now it's double the amount of work. In the private sector, you can just go to the SEC's website and download any data you want. And there are other companies or other like CompuStat, etc., that provide you with standardized data, and you can just download the whole thing, or you can do. So if you want to run analysis, it's easy to run analysis, given that because you have the data, right? Here you have to create the data. The guy we were talking about who actually compared the cost of the police dispatch from their city to the county actually had to file requests to get the data under the Freedom of Information Act. So he would have to actually send a request, an official request to collect the data. Basically, he collected the data, and he would wait for a week or two to get the data or something. Now, you have to go a little bit faster. So the idea here in our data, the Data Act, there was like a coalition of companies who actually started to working on lobbying to get this passed. Denise, Steve, and I were involved in it from its inception, basically, in that we would go to the Congress, we talked to several people, we talked to the Office of Management and Budget from the White House, with the Treasury, and we were actually following up with their progress. Now, this paper, in this one, we actually explain what the Data Act is, the single audit. The government entities, they have to file single audit reports, which is instead of, because they receive several funds, they would have to report for each and every fund. In this case, when certain entity, like Rutgers, for example, if they get more than $750,000 of funds every year, rather than having one audit per program, they would have it actually as one big audit. This is what they call it a single audit. They audit all their things. And this is almost as big as the financial statements. It's like 120 pages. The idea behind the Data Act was to provide the data in a more accessible, not just available. So I can actually give you a file and tell you, okay, so if you want to ask me for analysis, what can I do? So if you ask me for the financial statements of the company and I want to give you the data without actually giving you access to it, I can print them out on paper and I can give you all the information like that in boxes and tell you, here it is. Technically speaking, I gave you the data, but in reality, did I really give you access to it? I gave you something that will give you more trouble than actually can help analyze it. And this is one of the things that it was trying to do. It was kind of trying to, the Data Act's objective was to actually avoid this kind of issues when it comes to the data.
I just want to point out that there is software out there that does convert PDF, for example, to Excel or Word, but it doesn't like reduce the column headings and things like that. It usually shuffles things around.
And that only works with PDF that is actually as text,
right,
and that is not secure. So if the text is secure, you won't be able to extract it.
Exactly.
If the text is actually a scanned copy, you can't extract it. But if it is regular PDF, you can extract it. It would work very well for the textual part. But for tables, you forget it, because you have to actually make sure that every table, and most of the time it actually messes up. We tried to do that for several documents. It was hard to do.
Yeah, I don't want to do that nightmare again.
There are certain, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
There are certain services like Bloomberg who actually provide some of those information. However, you know that this is very expensive and they are not accessible to the normal user. So even for us as persons, it's not accessible except through Rutgers. Okay, so let's move on. Now, this is stolen from Denise's presentation. This is basically how it's simply, we're talking about like why do we care about it? And again, we go back to why do governments have to, why is it important to make sure that government reporting is correct, is timely, is accessible? Because the amount of taxes and tolls that you pay are even higher than what you pay for your living in general. And this is another one that I personally like a lot. This is this is basically the number here. It stands for the number of rank when you're ranked, and higher number like better. So if you're ranked number 1, that's not good. That's means that you're paying a lot of taxes. Those dates, as you can see, they are the dates when you break free or break even with your taxes. So in New Jersey, so that's New Jersey.
May 12.
It's May 12. Here it is. We're ranked number 49. Which is basically we're the worst. Actually, I flipped it. I just said this the opposite way. So we finished almost last, and I think now we are the last with the gas increase.
Yeah, with the gas price,
I think so.
It was higher than we were by a small bit. About that gas tax increase, now we're number 1. They'll come up because every year this is done by the Tax Increase Foundation, and they calculate all the costs.
I think this
tax
year-
and tolls.
Taxes and tolls.
Right, the property tax, the retail taxes, federal taxes, state taxes.
Property taxes and all these things. So when you pay all the taxes, basically until May 12, everything you earn until May 12 went to taxes. So you were working, everything you earn without eating, drinking, having to pay house, anything, nothing. So you had to pay everything until May 12 went to taxes. That's a lot. When you think about this, like half the year you're working for taxes. So that doesn't always, so this is why it's very important to make sure that you're actually, as a citizen, you want to know where your money is, right? So you want to know where the money is going. However, in the current reporting format, in PDF, etc., it's very difficult to do that. You pay money, okay, you don't know how it's spent. Unless you are very, very well trained in government accounting, which is not what happens with the majority of people. Denise, for example, she's an expert in government accounting. That's why her city, her town, they hate her, probably. Because she knows what they are saying, so she can call their bluff. What did you want to say?
I was saying, like, historically speaking, though, there's been tax rates have been pretty high. You know, like back in the 70s, like federal tax rate was up to 75% or something, the highest income tax bracket.
Yeah.
So, I mean, actually, you know, this is not that high relative to other periods of history.
And even relative to other countries, like Canada, they pay more taxes than we do. If you talk about other, like in Europe sometimes, I know that in France you can get taxes up to 80%, something like that.
Yeah.
So imagine that, like, if you make $1 million a year, you end up with having 200,000 and 800 go to tax. That's one of the reasons why Gerard Depardieu he ran away from France to Russia so that he would pay less taxes. No, that's a known fact.
I know, yeah, he did.
He officially said that I don't want to be a French anymore. I'm going to Russia. Again, the main place to actually find financial reports, the CAFR, they are called CAFR statements. Okay? So those are from, you can either get them from their own website. So if you go to the state of New Jersey, you can download their CAFR. If you go, CAFR is the financial statements, okay? Now if you go for example to the city of Newark, you can download it. However, any government entity that is filing or that is actually issuing debt, issuing bonds, they will have to file their report with the MSRB. Now, that's not bad. You have one repository, which is Emma. You can get from Emma all these reports. What's the problem with that? Again, it's in PDF. Not only that, you can download them one by one. You cannot, for example, go and download 100 of them. So, for example, if you want to look at all the municipalities in New Jersey, you can't. You have to download them one by one. we ask them actually access for it even for academic purposes, it's not that easy. You can actually, there are other, now people started to have different data, open data portals. I'll talk about that more in the second paper. But open data portals, they would allow you to have mostly, not financial statements, in this case it's like, for example, payments. They have open checkbooks. New York has open book. So this is like all the payments. Ohio State and the city of Austin in Texas, they have some of the best websites where they allow the citizens to access data about individual payments. That's good, right? There's a problem in that, okay, they don't provide a lot of analytics, but that we'll talk about later. However, USAspending.gov, this is the website where the Data Act will later on, basically this is where the Data Act requires the Treasury and OMB to file all the reports or to make available all the data in XBRL. Okay, so I'm going to show you here. Here I'm going to show you on this slide the CAFR for New Jersey State. Ha ha, you're supposed to laugh. Shame. Yes. I'm leaving it. When I post the slides, I'm leaving those so that they will know that I'm not. So this is not anymore. I'm not laughing anymore.
Same. Maybe I should get on some Valentine's candy. Maybe
They don't deserve it. They are sleeping.
Wake up.
Maybe they wake
You
up.
guys need to wake up.
So this is conditional candy.
Yeah. Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's, everybody. Some chocolate. If you have big chocolate, you're expected to speak out in class. Okay? I'm bribing you. Okay? Small party here. We can be vocal. There's nothing wrong with saying something. Right? PhD students aren't supposed to be shy. Right?
No, we're not supposed to be shy.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be like talking so much until
Yeah.
one guy tells you like, or someone tells you to shut up, basically.
Anyway,
That's how
today,
much you
but-
should be talking.
Yeah.
You know that actually you do realize that when you are in the seminar, it's extremely important that you ask questions. Thank you. I need
Take several.
I should have got some coffee instead of tea, but
Yeah, gee.
especially with them sleeping. Maybe I should
No,
get
wake
you
up,
coffee.
everybody. Happy Valentine's Day.
See, Denise is very nice and very strong. So she will beat you up if you don't wake up. She's a world record holder. I'm not supposed, I don't know if I'm supposed to say that or not. It's too late now, but
Yeah.
she lifts weights. Yes. This is why she's very disciplined. This is why she's always working. She's a hard worker, and she's not shy to speak and to say what she thinks. So single audit reports. Single audit reports, those are the ones that I was talking about earlier. They are very long, and I'm going to show you in a few seconds. I will show you the CAFR statements, and I will show you also the what do you call it, and the single audit file. So they are very long. More or less, they have different parts, and they are very long reports. And the idea here is that any entity that is receiving more than $750,000 per year in funds, okay, in awards and funds, what they do is they have to have one audit. Rather than having one audit per for individual programs, they would have one overall audit. They have different parts. One of them is for compliance, to make sure that the recipient was compliant with requirements of those funds and awards, and the other one is financial. This is similar to the company's financial statement. So they would have MD&A, they would have the normal financial statements, they would have the notes to the financial statements, etc. And they have the CFA section, the Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards. And the reason why we singled out this one is that this is our main focus in our paper. Now, again, this is currently in PDF. And as you can see here, this is kind of the fact how it is, what information is in each one of them. Rutgers 2015 report, single audit report, is 122 pages. Ohio State is 142 pages. That's a long document. That's a very long document. Again, you go back to the part where who would understand it? Do you think that a regular citizen would understand it? They would need something a little bit more accessible. Plus, if you have all these tables, and you will see how all these tables are formatted, you will see what you will understand what I'm talking about. So let me.
Jamie, to answer your question about who would understand all those statements and everything, law provides to actually have a consortium with the universities taking like master's students, PhD students to look at these financial statements and understand how they're playing out their budgets. I mean, that's how complicated the government accounting is.
It just seems ridiculous because you're pointing out like all these issues with it that are making it hard and unreadable, and the fact that it's in PDF and all that. Like, what? I mean, obviously they have some incentive to try to keep it hidden because then you got to keep the job.
Exactly.
But like,
Do you like to be graded? This is Nicholas something that always
I guess that's
mentioned.
the truth. Yeah.
Do you like to be
no
graded?
one really wants to be graded.
Okay, so off the record, how many times did it happen to you when you were not exactly sure of the answer, so you gave a vague answer that can go either way? I know I've done that before.
You coach your language so
In a certain case,
yeah.
if you're not very sure, you play around with the word in a way that it can be interpreted in two different ways. That's what they do, except with our tax money. So this is the document. This is Rutgers.
KPMG is our auditor.
Yeah. So this is Rutgers single audit report for the year 2015 and 2015. Okay. As you can see, this is 122 pages.
Even though we're a state university, we still are a separate recipient of funds from the federal government, either as passed through, like from another entity of the state, or directly from the government. So we're required to file with a single audit report.
And this actually complicates things. It's not only that sometimes you receive direct funds. Sometimes you have passed through funds where you are, for example, part recipient. Sometimes you have, for example, the fund is for multiple entities and they share it. And then you have the main recipient, and then you have the other recipients, right? In this case, how did the money go? And this is one of the examples that we give. It's very difficult to trace it back. So those are the ones that are the parts of the single audit report. Now, I'm going to skip to the CFA section. You see? That's part of the CFA section. You cannot see it, right?
One page, yeah.
Oops, that's too much. Can you guys see it now? So you see, for example, you would have, this is like a unique identifier. This is like University of Texas, Health Center, etc. And then you have this is the like an identifying number, and then you have the amount of the federal expenditure. That's a lot. And I'm not talking only about the money. And this is, remember, this is just a university. Imagine when you have to deal with a bigger entity or a state. Now, this is for the state of, I think this is Ohio. Here they have PwC. once again, you have the SEPA section where you would have the identifying number, this is the entity, and then you have the amount. When we talk about CAFR statements, this is the CAFR statement for New Jersey. Some of them actually they have pictures. Some of them they have, yes. Some of them they would have pictures. For example, if they have, and it makes sense. You maybe think about it like that. Seriously? Yes. For example, if they have a new project, let's say that a new park, they might add a picture of the park to inform their citizens that this is what we did and this is why we spent so much money, because eventually like, this is what we have. And you have again all these, you have part of them, they would actually include previous years. Now what's the problem with this kind of information? What's the problem with this information? So if I give you those, what's the problem? Do you see any problem? What?
Well, that's a large gap, so there could be issues of inflation or population change in the tax base and things
Even
like that.
before getting to that,
Missing value.
that's in PDF. How are you going to take this one and put it, for example, in SAS? If you are to analyze it in SAS to see, for example, to follow up why there are gaps or why the numbers they don't add up or something like that, first you need to put it in a software, right? What does it mean? It means that you have to import those tables. Now, this is fine if you have 1 page or 2, but when you have all these pages, see how many pages? Do you see how many pages? How can you extract all that? We tried to do that, by the way. It doesn't work very well. I mean, we used some of the best software that would convert PDF to Excel. It doesn't always work. You always have to make sure that the numbers here did not get mixed up during the conversion. Or worse, sometimes this number here would jump to that one here, or this one here would jump to this one here, because this is a picture. PDF is a picture, as opposed to Excel, which is a structured tabular format.
So if it's a private company or a public company, then they release their financial statement. The purpose is that the stakeholders, the bondholders.
No, but they have to also file the data in XBRL, and they also have to file it in a way that it is actually readable, not just in Excel, not just in PDF.
Yeah, but if the stakeholders, so the reason is that the stakeholders look at the financial statement and broadly and decide to invest or not to invest, right? Or to take away their money or put in more money. But if some taxpayer looks at this, I mean, what option does he have even if he doesn't like the financial statement?
Well, you can go and then, for example, ask them where's the money or why is there a gap.
But he still has to pay the same tax.
Well, you can move. You can choose to move. You can choose to move. So what you can do, for example, is in the same like a company. If you're not happy with the company's performance, what can you do? You switch your investment to a different company.
Yeah, but you can't take the money out if you're paying tax, right? You have to
Yes,
pay.
no, yes, you can. I can move. Right now, I live in Jersey City. I can move from Jersey City to, say, Hoboken. I can move from Jersey City to Union
You
City.
can change the state tax that you pay, but you can't change the federal tax you pay. You can't move out of the United States because you don't like the government's financial statement, right?
That's why it's
But that's a different story. This is one of the things about the government accounting. You cannot opt out. This is a mandatory thing that you cannot opt out. So this is not a question. Here we're not only talking about taxes. You're talking about how are your taxes spent.
Right.
There's a difference. You have to pay the taxes, but you have also the right. You have the option of making it known that okay, I'm paying my taxes to the city where I live. In return, I want to see some services. Why aren't these services known? And actually, not only that, you can actually use the information here. You're thinking only about from like, okay, so how much of tax I'm paying. What about people who invest in municipal bonds? There are a lot of people who invest in municipal bonds because cities are not likely to go bankrupt. So you know that the money is, except a couple of ones, Atlantic City and Detroit. But
There's a couple,
yeah, but in general, and they have credit ratings. So what they do is, instead of, for example, investing in a risky one, you can actually go with a better one. And in certain cases, and we had that paper by one of the presenters at last year, I think, where they were talking about municipal bonds and basically what affects the credit ratings of those municipal bonds. If, for example, the municipal bond is not doing, if you have the municipality, the city is not doing well, then credit ratings will give them a lower grade, right? What happens at that time? They will have to give a higher premium. They will have to actually give a higher interest rate. So they are losing money in this case. At this point, you make the decision. Do you want to invest in one, in basically municipality A, which is riskier but with higher interest rate, or B, which is safer and stronger city, but it has a lower interest rate? Yes.
Also, in response, you can vote to change the leadership if you see what is going on is not what you like. But then also,
this is an elected; those are elected officials. So if you have a lot of people who are actually not happy, then in the next election they may be lobbying, and then they can actually. A lot of people actually they don't get elected the next time if they are performing poorly.
Right. That's critical.
Is there any I understand there's demand by academics and investors that want to buy bonds, but is there any information on how many people in Joe Public are actually even trying to access this data in the first place?
This is the thing. At this point, the data is in boxes of papers. It's the same way.
Well, not entirely. You can go online and get the PDF. Not that that's
similar
much
to the
easier,
paper.
but
Similar to the paper.
Yeah.
But is there public outcry to say it's all well and good for us academics to sit here and say, well, we want to look at the data and we can't?
Apparently, yes, because if you remember 2 years ago, Denise, when in the government accounting conference that we hold in New Brunswick, there was someone from I think she was from the division of local government services, something like that. If I remember correctly, she was saying that there was a court order that ordered one of the municipalities to provide the data in Excel because the person who requested the data received it in PDF, and he was saying that PDF is not user-friendly from an analysis perspective. So there is demand, yes. How much the demand is, I don't know, and I don't think that this is actually. I think a lot of people actually complain about it, but sometimes if you see that it's across the board that you don't have this kind of information. Whereas when you look at open data portals with checkbooks, you see that you can see actually sometimes some of them they will show you the number of visitors and the number of reports that were downloaded. You see that people are downloading reports and people are looking at the data over there.
That's we're talking about the size. In my town, if I request my budgetary data or the financial reports, they give it to me in PDF, and they claim they can't afford to go through the translation process using Excel, even though they're required by state law to do it. So it's very hard for the smaller municipalities, towns, 560 of them here in this state, to produce these kind of reports.
It costs money.
It costs a lot of money.
They will have someone to actually produce it.
What's the difference in terms? Other than if it's a scanned PDF, what's the difference in terms of entering it in the computer in PDF versus Excel or something like that?
Well,
it seems
PDF,
to me to be
PDF is a picture. Still,
arbitrary.
PDF is a picture.
Yeah,
So PDF, the table is there.
No, I understand in terms of a user point of view the difference, but in terms of inputting it, why would they say it costs so much more to put it in Excel?
So in PDF they have, every page has headers, right?
It has the same thing.
So it has the same thing, so you're not lost in this page, this report that's 200 pages long, okay?
And it's not that, it's usually also the fact that you cannot make changes to it.
Right.
So you cannot change with Excel. If I send you the file in Excel, I can make changes to the number and then I can claim that this is wrong.
Yeah,
They will have to go
you can
back to
lock
the
the sheet
original
code.
one. So it's additional work to them.
Well, now you can change it in PDF software, but
Yes,
it's
it still
it's
shows
a
that.
static document basically, and it's not machine readable. That's the other problem.
So this is another thing actually with PDF. The fact that, like, for example, actually the way they prepare it is usually using Word. So they prepare everything and then they print it as PDF and they save it.
Oh, it's because they prepare it in Word. And
In
it's
Word or
easier
in
to
Excel.
put-
You can actually have it either Word or in Excel and then you can print
But
it
you
out.
can like lock an Excel sheet, and if people want it in Excel and you can prepare it in Excel,
Again, they
why
want
would
to be
you-
graded.
So they're just doing it to avoid.
It's a
That's the
process.
thing.
It's like, yeah.
I mean, they will tell you, okay, so the law requires us to provide the data. We provided you with the information. But it's in a bad format. Oh, not my problem. That's your problem. You deal with it. This is basically, this is, in a way, this is how it is. And we actually dealt with that when we went once to Trenton. They actually do budgets. How do they do it? Someone actually prepares it in Excel. They print it on paper or send it as PDF. And the other person, on the other hand, they take the paper and they re-enter it in Excel in the same format. So I asked them a simple question as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so why don't you actually ask them to send it in Excel?
Right.
Can't you require it? They were like, yes, we can, but at this point, we don't. Why? I did not get a real answer. That's how we do it. It's simple like that. That's how we do it.
So,
And I don't understand why. Is it efficient? Of course not. Does it have more problems? Yes, it adds manual entries, so it can create additional problems, but this is the way it is.
You don't forget
this, all of this points to the fact that these people don't want other people analyzing the data. Right?
Again, they want to be graded.
Yeah, but doesn't
You want me
that-
to drill you on what
but-
you were supposed to read for
But
today's lecture?
doesn't that translate into them trying to cover something?
Not necessarily.
Wouldn't you think that?
Not necessarily.
Why?
Not necessarily. Sometimes it's lack of resources. They simply don't want to. I'm not in the mood to do that. Sometimes it's simply that, okay, so let's just not open this can of worm. So it's not necessarily that they've done something or they are trying to cover something up. It's simply that in certain cases they don't have the time to respond to all your questions. And if they make them more available, then you will be asking more questions, some of which will just give them a headache and will not lead anywhere. And at that time, there would be, okay, so what's the cost benefit? So they run their cost benefit analysis. What's the benefit as opposed to the cost to them to provide this kind of information? Unless someone is required, basically, so there are two ways. So in certain cases when someone is doing an extraordinary work, they want to send a signal that they are amazing. In this case, this is, for example, I'm going to give you an example. That's Denise. When she's in a classroom or when she's in a seminar, she's asking all these questions. She's sending a signal that she read the paper, that she knows what the paper is about, that she's an amazing PhD student, right? And then you have some people who were supposed to read the papers before coming to class, but did not. So they hide behind their computers, behind their desks. They drop something like 100 times during the seminar so that they don't answer a question, right? That's the attitude. It's not that they are doing, even if they read the paper, but they just scanned through the paper, or they read the paper but not as diligently as Denise. What happens in this case? They are not covering anything, but they simply don't want. They don't want to actually be singled out. Yes.
I mean, you can't de-emphasize enough that there is a different motive. I mean, it's not the profit motive in the government. And for those who've worked in a corporation, you know what it's like. I mean, yes, corporations have certain inefficiencies, but overall there's always a pressure on every process about cost benefit. Okay, what is the profits generated versus the cost? And the government, the smaller municipalities might have that, but the larger the government gets, the more you have bloat. And there's nobody really overriding the government agencies to really make them more efficient, like would in business. Because it's all, this is all about bottom line, the recorder that meet their numbers, or else somebody's head's going to block. The government, you don't have that kind of accountability, nor do you have that kind of pressure.
It's about keeping everyone's job.
Right.
And if you cut out this process, maybe the secretary loses a job.
For example, like the federal government, there's talk about, like, he's put a hiring freeze. He can't fire people in the government unless they are political appointees.
And
I mean, the career government people, they can only like lose their position, and then they can actually, they can kick off somebody from their position. It's called riffing. The only way you can cut back force is by actually not hiring anybody new.
I remember, like, also you have the problem with if you're talking about like, for example, I remember when we talked once to them about automation,
Right.
they freak out because in this case, how are they going to actually? First of all, how are they going to explain the cost to their constituents?
Exactly.
Some constituents would say that, okay, instead of wasting your money on some software or computer program, or someone to hire someone who would run that kind of analysis, why don't you use that money more efficiently to provide better help? So in this case, again, it's very different. It's the program, the
Yeah.
process is very different.
Exactly, in the Data Act, like, we're finding that we went to different federal agencies. I mean, most of the accountants probably never learn all to do whatever automation goes into place in the federal government. They
Remember that
have a
one?
mindset against it's like it's not traditionally done, and it's like they have job security, and it's very difficult to get them to change.
And many of them actually are just thinking about that, okay, so we'll just outsource it. We'll
Yeah.
just hire someone to.
Well, they have been doing that.
They have been doing it.
So then, one last question about this. If quality of performance is an aspect, and this is one element, it's their accounting branch. So why isn't their quality of performance being dinged for not providing the documents very effectively to the public? If the point is we're providing these documents so people, the regular people, can read them and find out this information, then why is that not poor quality of service?
Jamie, how often do you hear government officials or elected officials saying to citizenry, "You're my boss. I answer to you"?
Not very often.
Exactly.
But the
They're
auditing
there
companies.
because they're there to serve the citizenry. The government provides services. Even with, the primary service of government initially was for providing security to the country and for the citizens, to enable your rights to be, you can exercise your rights. Expanded over the years, it's always been about service. So they're there to serve you.
You just need to keep in mind that this is different, and the reason why they don't provide this kind of information, that's not just the point. So this is one of the ways, but however, this is how it is at this point. And many of them, they don't want to make any changes. This is how it's been done for years and decades, so let's just keep doing that in this way. Now, when you think about data format, you start off usually with a picture. So this is PDF. PDF can be read by us, human. The computer, when they can read it, they have to transform it to a different format, but the computer doesn't read it on its own. They convert it to something else. Now the other type, the better quality type, this is actually time, effort, and money. How much it costs you to actually use the data or analyze the data. So at the beginning you have PDF, and then you move on to having raw text. If I provide you the information in Word, then you have, but not in Word, in raw text, in text file. It's easier to analyze, it's already in text, however you lose the formatting. And then after that you have Word, which is some text, but it provides for some formatting. Then you have a tabular form, either in CSV or in Excel or something like that. You have a better one. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming here. Thank you for coming.
I'm leaving, right? You're welcome. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Thanks, same to you. And then you have the relational databases. Those they would provide for multiple tables and stuff like that. And at the end you have XML. This is similar to HTML, extensible markup language, where you have tags. And after that, you can also have XBRL, XBRL, Extensible Business Reporting Language, which is a machine readable one. What do we mean by machine readable? Machine readable means that two computers, if they communicate in XBRL, they would not need a human interpretation. HTML, you understand that it has tags, etc., right? What did I do last time when we sat here? I asked each one of you to put their name in front of them, right? No, you don't have to, I'm just saying, like, why did I do that? Because in order for me to know that this person is, for example, if I want to look at, for example, this person, this is Katie, this is Jamie. I need to have the name, I need someone to introduce themselves. Now let's say that we were, instead of doing that, you came in immediately to class and you had a name tag here, like we do in conferences. You have a name tag. What happens? I won't need to ask you for your name, I can read your tag. I communicated with your tag, extracted the information without asking you to interfere, right? HTML, when you actually type at the top, for example, www.rutgers.edu or business.rutgers.edu, you are sending a request. The request was typed. What happens? Your internet browser translates that request into a different format. It will send it to the website. The business school's website will send back the information. They will send the information not the way we see it. It will not be with a picture here and a video there and a news feed here and text over there. It's not going to be like that. Have you seen an HTML file? I'll show you an HTML file. So, for example, so this one here, let's say that that's Blackboard, right? You see how you see it, right? This is how you see Blackboard. Exactly. If you click here, for example, on, that's that information that this is how your internet browser received the information. It did not see it as a picture, as everything like we've seen it, like you usually see it. So you can see here, announcement. Do you see the word announcement? You see the word announcement? This is when you look at it and you see announcements. So if you want to see, for example, you see this one here? This is the business school, right? Once again, let's open here. This is the page. That's how your browser receives the information. This is how, you see, this is, well, you cannot see it like that, but let me just increase the size. This is graduate admissions here. Can you see it? You have business insights, graduate admissions. And the picture itself, or sometimes like you have a picture, etc., it simply tells them the website will send information to your browser where to find the image, or where to find the file, where to find the document, or the video. Your browser automatically will reassemble the website, and then you, as a human user, you see it like that. This is what happens. You send information, you actually ask your browser to get you business.rutgers.edu. That's all you do. The work is done by your browser, between the browser and the web server of Rutgers Business School. The information is translated, it's shown on your browser without your intervention. The same way you have when we talk about machine readable data, this is what we mean. And now this is just a quick thing just to explain a little bit more about XBRL. So you have this, think about this. You have a group of 5 bankers, they had a meeting. Alan, Charlie, Arnie, Sam, and John. And they were actually sitting and they received, each one of them, written instructions. Give, so you read it. Now, what do you think can happen as misunderstandings? Jake.
The date.
The date.
Should we
Is it
misunderstand?
2008, September 9? I'm sorry, no, November 9, or is it September 11, 2008, or how? Is it the year, month, day? Is it, for example, like in the US, you have it as month, day, and year? So that's not clear, right? What else?
Dollars means Canadian dollars. Australian
Dollars, exactly. What dollars? Is it US dollars, or is it Canadian dollars, or is it Australian dollars? What else?
There must be a person who's at the most right.
So is it, they are sitting in a circle. So they are sitting in a circle to make it easy. But you are kind of correct on that one. You are in the right direction. Is it the person to your right now or on that date? Doesn't say. It can be the person to your right now. In this case, you would give it to Ben. But like next week, you might be sitting next to Jamie. In this case, are you going to give it to Ben or to Jamie? So that's another thing. What about this number? Is it 5,000 or is it 5.000? Depending on whether you're talking about to a European or US, so that changes. So this is just to give you an example of the problems that can arise from a very simple instruction. When you read it the first time, you thought that, okay, it was very easy to understand, to interpret, but it's not. So what does XBRL do? And I'm not going to talk too much into detail about it. This is something that will be explained later on by Professor Wano. That's his expertise. So XBRL, the idea behind it is to add tags. So let's say that we go back to the number here. Okay? You can have this one here as 5,000. You can attach to it a tag saying that this is 5,000. The currency is in US dollars. And this is for fiscal year 2011. Just giving an example. You can add those tags. In the same way that, like when you go to a conference, what information do you add? Your full name. You put, for example, also next to it, your preferred name. What do you want people to call you? Do you want them to call you by your last name or first name? Next to it, what do you put? Your affiliation. Like you put, for example, Hussein Isa. I put Hussein. Underneath it, I put Hussein Isa, that's my full name. And then I put underneath it Rutgers Business School, so that people would know. You can add additional information. What do you do here? You are, for example, a first year AIS student or first year accounting student. Accounting PhD student. You can simply say as PhD student, you can add your discipline. You can add your year. So you can add all this kind of information. All these are on tabs, right? Am I correct? So that makes it easy, right? It's like if I tell you buy a laptop or buy a computer. That's vague. I can add more information. So this is a computer. It's a laptop. It's, for example, by for example, Lenovo or Dell, and then you can have all the additional information. Yes.
Is this like a hyperlink? Say, if you do not understand or it doesn't make sense clearly, you just click it. It shows that.
Not 100%, but it does provide additional information. You'll see it in a second. I will show you actually the document that they created. So this is, for example, one of the advantages of this is that it provides with standardization. Like, it has, for example, a label. The label is called cash equivalents, and short-term investments. That's the label. That's what the computer will read. So if you find an amount here that is 5,000, the computer will automatically understand, the computer software, this is what we mean, the computer software will automatically interpret it as cash equivalents, and short-term investments. Now, there is also the presentation. This is for us as humans to understand. This is something that we need. It's called presentation. Underneath it, you have cash and cash equivalents. Okay? It doesn't matter whether it was in English or in French. It can also be, doesn't matter if it were in German. It can be in Dutch. I'm not sure which one is which. That you would know more. This is Chinese? Okay, so it can be Chinese. Don't you dare laugh. This is Japanese. This is in Russian. This is English, so I'm fine with that. So it can be in Ukrainian, it doesn't matter at this point. The idea here is that every person will be able to read it. But whatever you put here, it's irrelevant. So you see like if you're using Excel and you're writing a script, or if you're using SAS and you're writing a script, you have to write the name of the variable exactly the way it is, right? The variable, if I'm writing it in English as opposed to French, it will not be the same. So the script will not work, right? But in this case, this is what the script will read. This is irrelevant to the script. This is for us to understand. But the script will go to that one, to the label. And then you have references. Where does it come from? Where the standards related to this one. You can have, for example, information that can be calculation. How do you calculate it? You can have in which the context can be, for example, the currency, the fiscal year. If you have certain rules that cash must be greater or equal to 0 if you want to prevent it from being negative. So this is basically simply what it needs to be XBRL. XBRL also provides for hierarchy. So you can go from, let's say, for example, from assets, then you can have underneath it, you have current assets, and then you can underneath it, it's in a hierarchical way. Okay? This is all we're going to discuss about XBRL. Professor one later on will talk more about this. But you get the point, right? That in this case, the software will automatically understand what the information is on that financial statement. You won't have to to enter the variable name. Now the Data Act, it started in 2014, and it passed into law. And then they had 1 year to prepare for a pilot program to come up with the elements, the taxonomy. Taxonomy is basically like a dictionary. Think about it. So you are familiar with taxonomy, right? So taxonomy, it took them actually more than a year. But there were like some delays until like August, I think. They ended up with 57. Last time I checked. The pilot program is expected to end in 2017. HHS is actually leading that. The Data Act, the people who are in charge of kind of running the Data Act are the US Treasury and the Office of Management and Budget from the White House. In 2017, in May 2017, the pilot program will end. They will report to the Congress, to see whether they are like based on the results of the program, and based on that they will issue guidance on to the other recipients as to whether or not to use it. Originally, we believe that the idea was for the recipients to file their information directly in XBRL, but later on we learned that this has changed because this is non-funded, so anyone who does it, they will have to do it on their own. And a lot of people, like we said, if you have a small town, it's very unlikely that they can hire someone who can do that. So instead, what will happen is they will file it to Treasury, and Treasury will convert it to XBRL and will post it to usaspendings.gov. That's the story of the Data Act. Now, the idea again here, as you can see, one of the most important things is to have machine readable format, non-proprietary, because they want it to be accessible to anyone who wants to use it. They don't want to have something proprietary to a specific company. So, and they want it to be downloadable in bulk. So you can download, like for example, for multiple entities rather than doing that one by one. Basically, they are trying to address the issues that are currently happening in government reporting. Now, the trick is this is for the federal reporting. Why? Because the federal government, they can mandate something or require something for federal reporting. This is especially when anyone is receiving funds from the federal government. But if it has to do with state and local governments, this is totally different. This is up to the state. Now the idea and what we think about it is, if you are already filing those data in XBRL, nothing prevents you from using it also for state and for the state reporting as well. And again, here the idea was to establish some standards. Remember that there are no standardized definitions. You see something as simple as safety expenditures. You think that it's simple, right? It's not. What does safety expenditures include? Police department, fire department, what about cross guards? Some entities they actually include it, others they don't. I'll make it even more complicated. We were involved in something called the red phone. This is kind of like we used to have like weekly calls to discuss the elements that are proposed by OMB and to comment on them. Something as simple as obligation. People do not agree on that, on the meaning of that word. So it was a really big thing to standardize those elements. And those are the elements that they came up with at the end. Again, this is thing. The elements that they actually used or came up with, they are built on previous legislation elements, and then we added to them some of them. So you have the awardee and recipient entity, you have award amount, award characteristics, funding entity. Those are the broad six categories. Those are the broad categories. Underneath them, they fall, like they have all the elements that the U.S. Treasury and OMB came up with. Now, this is where we come into play, and this is our paper. This is what we did. We thought about it and we said, okay, now if the government is going to use this one to report for basically based on the requirements of the Data Act, how difficult would it be to extend that taxonomy to cover another report? You see, one of the problems, as we said, is redundant reporting, right? So redundant reporting, how can we decrease that? It will decrease the burden, and it will make it easier to find all the information in one place, rather than having to go to A, B, C, D databases and try to download the data and combine it. If you have it in one place, or at least if you have it in certain format. In this case, rather than reporting, filing two reports, you file the data, and every entity who wants the report, they can actually extract their own report. It's basically giving you some kind of, let's think about it as building blocks, as Lego, and each one of you can build whatever they want with it. You want to have a square with it, you can build a square with it. You want to have a cube, you can build a cube. You want to have a circle, you can build that, right? So I'm giving you the building blocks. This is the data, and then the reports can be extracted based on whatever you want. We wanted to actually extend that to the CFA section. You remember how big the CFA section was from the single audit report? It's actually more than half the report. It talks about different expenditures and funds, etc. And this is what we said before. You have the unique identifiers, you have the grantor and the pass-through, etc. Who is giving the money, and whether it was a pass-through or direct grant, and then you have the amount. Good? Okay. Again, this is in PDF, so it's very difficult to actually extract. We converted them with the aid of a company called Data Tracks. They converted them to XBRL. We created the taxonomy. So we had to develop our own taxonomy because that taxonomy is not existing. So we developed the taxonomy, we built on top of the taxonomy that was developed by OMB and US Treasury. And this is just a proof of concept. It's not like a complete taxonomy. This is just for this purpose. We have here the information. Here, as you can see, this is a unique label. And then you can have the information as where you can find. Like for example, this is CIK. You can get it from www.sec.gov/CIK. You have here the information, the same information that was in the PDF file. This is in XBRL. This is understandable by a computer. So if I use my software to analyze it, the software will look at this number and will automatically understand without me having to explain what the variable is. My software will automatically understand, okay, so this number, that's the CIK. They won't need you to define that information. This makes it a lot easier, right? Now, this is how it would look like to our eyes. The information is built in behind it anyway, you can think about it. And actually, the way we have it right now, if you click on one of those, there will be a pop-up that will actually give additional information. We use this one to run analysis. I'll show you in a second the files. And then we'll have a very short break. So this is the file. We try to, okay. So what we try to do here is try to see or to follow a grant shared by Rutgers and Ohio State. Okay, for this one here, 10.307, that's the unique identifier, right? For this one, we looked at it. Rutgers reported it as, we combined this one and we added the amount. The total amount was equal to $903,890. We looked at all the amounts that are in that for that year. We looked at the report, okay? The report here shows this amount. This is for Rutgers. We looked at Ohio State. Ohio State, they reported it as here. Can you see it? 3,334. This is the amount that they received from Rutgers. So what is the difference? There are some missing information. Now it doesn't mean that someone stole it. It simply means that this is something that you need to drill down and to dig deeper to find this. But that was a very simple thing. That was a very simple analysis to do when we had the data converted into XBRL. When we had it originally, so you can have it even if it were in Excel, you can run such analysis. But if you had it in PDF, how likely are you to find that this 10.307, this program, had missing amounts? Or is there something that's not clear about it? It's very unlikely. You're not going to sit through all these and say, oh, okay, so this amount is over there. But if you were to compare, it becomes a lot easier. So this is what we believe that the benefits of the Data Act will be. We believe that it will reduce redundant reporting, because in this case, as you can see, it was not very difficult for us to reconstruct, rebuild the CIFA section using the taxonomy that was provided, that we created and we developed, which was not very difficult, very different. So in this case, let's say that you are Rutgers University. Instead of filing the two reports, you can submit the data in XBRL, and then people who want to create the CIFA section, they can recreate it. People who want to create the CAFR, they can create it. So you can actually create what reports you want. And the advantage in this case would be to use this XBRL. Let's have a break, 5-minute break. 5 minutes as in 5 minutes, not 5 minutes as in 15 minutes. And then we come back here. Then the next paper we're talking about today this is, again, it's also by Denise, Steve, and me, and this is part of Steve's dissertation. This is where we talk about exactly the problem of, from a constituent perspective, where data is available, how is it available, is it just available online or is it accessible, plus, if it's accessible, it's like what you said earlier, do you think that the regular citizens can actually understand the data? They will get lost, right? Most of the time, when they have all this report, 150 pages or 200 pages or 300 pages, they won't know where to start. They're looking for information about pension unless they really understand accounting. They can't find that information, and as a result, they leave it. The idea here was that we looked at different open data portals. There are more and more cities and states that are providing open data portals. What do we mean by that? This is where they actually post the data. Like, for example, checkbooks. What do we mean by checkbooks? And I'll show you actually in a second what those checkbooks are. It's actually, they provide you with payment information, the vendor. Remember that all these are publicly available, public records. So as a result, they would put the vendor, the amount, they would put, for example, what the money was for, where it came from, the date, and like all this information is available. The problem is they only provide a couple of analytics that are out of the box. For example, who are the top 10 vendors, or who are the top 10 payees, like people who get money, right? So those are the analytics that are available there, but nothing more advanced. So if you want to drill down or to compare across entities, it's very, very difficult. However, people are asking more and more for transparency. This is the driver of the Data Act, but again, there's a lot of analytics. There's a concept of the armchair auditor. Are you guys familiar with the armchair auditor? The armchair auditor is an expression that first came, time, I think it was the British Prime Minister, James Brown, who actually came up with this, and he talked about the armchair auditor. The armchair auditor is not an official auditor. Doesn't have to be a CPA. That's a citizen who can actually, the citizen would not necessarily be the CPA who is actually auditing the financial statements or the CAFR statements of that entity. However, they look at the information that's available online and then they start analyzing it. That's the concept behind armchair auditor. The guy we talked about earlier, who actually analyzed the cost of police dispatches between the county and the city, he found that, for example, the city is much more expensive to use the police from their city than to use the police in the county. And actually, when he started to dig deeper, but he had to collect the data himself. And it was not easy. He would collect the data, run the analysis himself, and he's a CPA with years and years of experience, and he is an expert in ACL. Are you guys familiar with ACL, the software? ACL is one of the most used, basically it's one of the strongest audit software, audit analytics software. You have the two most famous ones are ACL and IDEA from Casework. And he uses ACL. The Big Four, they use ACL. Yes?
I just want to add something about the Armchair Auditors.
Oh, she published a paper with June on Armchair Auditors. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes. There was a paper by O'Leary. Actually, he raised the idea of Armchair Auditors use it for the government accounting. And so even though we say that Armchair Auditors meaning that all the citizens, everyone who has interest for the spendings of the government, but actually many common people, they may not just go to the internet and find a lot of financial information and try to analyze them because it is difficult and they may not have the capability. So there are a couple of groups that more likely to be the armchair auditors. One is the press. They may want to find some scandal of the local government, and the governmental competitors, and then the business competitors. They may want to see, if their competitors are working with the government, they want to see what is there any deal that is not good, so they can replace them. So
For example, they can bid on a certain, let's say they don't have good providers of certain service, they can bid and to outbid the current providers.
Yes.
Okay, and I said earlier, James Brown, this is what happens when I don't drink coffee in the afternoon. So it's actually, it's David Cameron. Those are the questions, actually, this is the paper that you mentioned. So this paper is actually to answer some of the questions that Dan O'Leary asked at the end of his paper. That's the paper that you were referring to, O'Leary's paper, about that one. And for example, how can the governments engage the citizens to become, for example, armchair auditors? How can they encourage them to become armchair auditors? Like we said, again, instead of hiring more auditors, we can have the citizens do that for you. The armchair auditors do that for you. And then how can the technology, the existing technology, help them? And is it going to actually facilitate their work and improve the quality of their work? So again, this is just to look at, this is very similar to the one that we talked about before, the public versus private sectors. Those are some of the open data initiatives. Those are available and they provide some information on those ones. So let me see if I can here. So, if you type, for example, Ohio Checkbook, you end up with this. Those are the ones that are, so expense by category. You have here, for example, year-to-year spendings. Those are very basic analytics. This cannot help you if you're trying to replace the current vendor or if you're trying to get into the market. So if you want to see, for example, will I be able to go, for example, is it worth it for me to open a restaurant in Newark? Or, I'm sorry, not the restaurant, to provide some services like catering services to the government. Would it be beneficial to me or not? And then you have, for example, others like the news, the press, or competitors. They want to dig up some dirt on certain government officials. They want to see whether they are actually running the town efficiently. Like in Jersey City, couple of years ago, we had issues like where there were snowed a lot, and while we pay a lot of taxes as property taxes, the snow stayed on the streets for weeks. They did not plow the streets. So in this case, the political opponent or the competitor of that of the mayor can, for example, look at it and see and can analyze the data and where the spendings are, etc. So those are the payments. And if you look at it, if you click on, for example, a certain payment, so you have it here. You can drill down, basically you can click on one of them. You can export the data. You see here, the Department of Transportation, Public Works Commission. You know, it's very difficult to see, those are very small. If you click on one of them, something like this will come up. This is not an actual check, but this is like a mock check, if you want. When you have the company, you have a memo for the why is it paid for, and then you have some information here. Where's the money coming from? If you click on this one here, it will tell you the money, the funds is highway operations, and this is identified. This is the appropriation line item, and then you have the program. So you have this additional information, and you have information on the person who is getting paid that amount. That's a significant amount of information, right? However, when you download it in Excel, and this is downloadable in Excel, a lot of this information will not be seen. Basically, this is more or less what you receive. But you don't see where the funds is coming from. You don't see that information. So while it is available in format, while it is available like this is very interesting, but when you download it, you don't have it. Unless you start doing that one by one. You're not going to do that one by one for thousands of records. So this is an example of the data that is available, but it's not really accessible. You can click on each one of them, and it will show you the same thing. This is like the same company was paid almost 283,000. And the same thing you can see with Austin, Texas, and with the others. They also have the same type of data. So those are, like, for example, Ohio Checkbook. This is the one that we just looked at. You can compare between two agencies. Like, you can look at funds, you can search for that information, and you can export it into I think, in Excel, PDF. If you want, you can extract it in text, in raw text. You can extract it in CSV and stuff like that. Austin, Texas, you can also even download it in JSON and in XML. Those are basically, so XML, it's also like machine readable, and it has 33 different attributes. Many of them actually, they use what we call like Socrata. This is a platform. We noticed that they like it. I think it's affordable and it's very specific to, it can happen a lot for, let's say, city or something like that. They provide the API so that you can actually download the data in bulk. Yes?
So previously you were talking about how a lot of different municipalities, they don't want to make these moves. Why have these municipalities chosen to do this?
They're not providing everything. They're providing the payments.
Okay.
They want to show that they are actually doing something to improve their transparency. And when you have, you know that you have like over 80,000 municipalities and towns, like local governments in the US, over 80,000. So when you have a bunch of them do that, this is negligible compared to that majority. Like in New York City, they have something like that, but in many cases, only like bigger ones they do.
But do these bigger municipalities, are they only providing like the transaction data, or are they also providing the overall financial data?
Or they have to provide the financial statements. The CAFR statements, everyone has to.
But is it provided in like a machine
PDF.
readable?
No, PDF.
Still PDF?
Oh, still PDF. Ohio State, for example, it's still in PDF. They have this one like that, but Ohio State it's in PDF.
And
You
that-
remember in the previous paper when we showed you like how like Rutgers, how it became. Did I show you the Rutgers CAFR statement? No, I did not. Not in PDF, not the ones in PDF.
So I'm assuming they're doing it for this because there's nothing to really hide with the transactions. But when it comes to the overall statement, they try to play these games.
This is fine. There's not a question of trying to hide something. It's simply sometimes that they don't have the means to do it. It's expensive, and to them it's going to add. It's like, why don't external auditors run analytics on the overall population? They don't have to. Why would I do that? Question is, what's the benefit? What's in it for me? So this is, for example, this is 5 here. When you click on those ones, those are the CFA sections. This is how we converted it. You remember the CFA section, the CAFR statement? This is how we converted it. And if you click on one of these, it gives you some additional information. So this is actually very difficult. We had to have, like this company helped us do that. It took them months to just do a couple of them. Why? Because we had to convert them from PDF to XBRL. Why do you think any entity would do that on their own? Unless they are required to buy them. So unless they are required to do that, why would they? In this case, you have additional information. So this is that. If you look at it, for example, you look at what the name is, and you look at this is a debit. This is you can have the duration. Now remember that this is just for like a proof of concept. It's not a full taxonomy, but that's the one that we had done. This is the same. If you convert this one, it ends up the same as this one, right? You see this one here? This is the same one as the one that I showed you before. This is the grant information number 1. That's kind of easier to read. If you want to look at it as a tabular, this will show you the same information rather than having it as XBRL. Now, that one, if you look at it here, no, not here. 5, 6. That's how it will look like the software, not Mac. That's how it will look like. So when you look at it, this is how it will look like. You have again the numbers, you have etc. This is an XBRL. This is the XML file from that. Okay. So what we came up with here was we wanted to look at what we wanted to do is we wanted to actually think about it from a citizen's perspective. You would expect most citizens or most constituents to be not sophisticated enough to run their own analysis. I mean, we are all here studying methodologies, different methodologies, and what I can do, Chow may not be able to do, and what Chow can do, I can't do sometimes. So it's basically, it's what methodology you learn. That's why you see that people kind of get expert in certain areas, but not in everything, right? Part of you, for example, will be using SAS. Others will be using Python to code their own, to write their own code. Others will use IDEA or ACL. Now, this is as software. When you think about the methodology itself, whether you're going to use regression or logistic regression, or for example, if you're going to use cluster analysis or rule-based systems. So basically what you use, but if you're going to use data mining or, again, which model you're using. You don't expect regular users to be able to, or regular citizens to be able to run this kind of analysis. It's much more complicated, right? So we thought about it from that perspective. And we think that providing them with a system that would enable them to gain a decision support system. A decision support system is a system that allows you to gain knowledge that is similar to experts. Right? So in this case, for example, if you don't know how to write the code to run, for example, Benford's law, there would be a drop-down list where you can run Benford's law. Stuff like that. This is just a simple example. This is where you have, for example, drop-down lists, and you select a certain task to do, and then it does it automatically for you. Now, this is the framework. You have the user, you have the enhanced framework, and you have the different government data. This one will not work, of course, if you have the data in PDF. This is assuming that you have the data in more or less a computer or machine-readable format. This is one of the reasons why, again, it's very important to have something in machine-readable format to be able to run this kind of analysis. Now, the first step for this one, you have the user. This is a regular citizen. They don't have any expertise, but they know that they want to look at the payments in the city of Newark. Good? They look for payments. They search, they actually request the payments data set, Newark's payment data set. They send this request to a structural app. Now, structural app, it simply means that what we mean by it here is that this app is a program, right? App is an application, it's a program. They send the request, the app will actually look at the available data repositories, select that data, and look at its dictionary. Look at what's available on that data. What do they have on that data? It reports back, and it tells the user of the results. It tells the user, okay, I found the database. I found the data set for the payments for the city of Newark. They provide the following variables. They provide the following attributes: date, check number, payment, payee, program, source of money, etc. I'm just giving an example, okay? They provide all this information. And then, at the same time, you have a recommender system app. I'll get to this one in a second. This is an app that actually recommends certain tasks, certain tests. So what it does, it will tell the user, you have all these variables, and we recommend that you can run, or some of the tests that we suggest, they suggest certain apps. How? The recommender system will look at whatever available analytics are available and that can be run on those variables. You know that depending on the variable, you can run different tests, right? You cannot run all the tests on all the variables, right? You have to wake up a little bit, because you can't read. You have to wake up a little bit more. Now, you have the recommender system will check the variables, look at the apps that are available, and run and send the information to the user. They will tell them, okay, based on the available attributes that are the following, and they give them a list of the variables. We have those are the tests, or those are the analytics that we suggest you would run. The user will make the selection of the app. They say that they decide to run cluster analysis, and they will send it to Enhance. Enhance, the execution app, will log this information. They will pick the app that needs to be executed. Again, they will collect the data, run it on the data, send it back in the format that was requested by the user. So the user might ask, okay, I want to run cluster analysis and I want the report to be done in Excel. Then you will actually send it, run the analysis, convert the results to the format requested by the user, and then this information is sent back to the user as a report in the format that they requested it. The idea was that, how many of you use smartphone? You guys use smartphones. Are you guys developers? App developers? Yet we all use apps, and plenty of apps on our phones, right? So that's the same idea. You want to have this platform where you have multiple apps. However, the apps that I have are different from the apps that my wife has. We use different apps, right? They are different from the apps that my kids use. In the same way here, you have the app library. That's like the App Store or Google Play, right? It's still called Google Play, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you can pick the apps that suit you, and then you run the app. It's in the same way. Now we get back to the recommender system. June actually did some research on that one. Now the recommender system, have you heard of the recommender system? No? That was not a rhetorical question, that was a question. I'm asking to know whether I should explain it or not. Are you guys familiar with recommender systems? Okay, recommender system is like a software program that analyzes previous data and then makes recommendations based on that. It's in the same way like Netflix, when they tell you, based on this TV show that you watched, we suggest this. Or when you buy something from Amazon, every time you buy something from Amazon, they will tell you those two items are often sold together. Or customers who purchase this item, they also purchase that. How do they get this information? They say that they analyzed purchase of phone case. They look at it and they see every time someone is purchasing a case for their phone, they are also buying a screen protector. Now you are buying, for the first time, you buy a phone case. They look at what other customers bought. They analyze the data. And they say that, okay, similar customers purchased this additional item. Maybe you would be interested in it. The other way would be, they see that, for example, every time you're looking for, I don't know, so every now and then you like to change, or like you're buying stuff for school. So they know that you are a student. Or you have like Amazon Prime as a student. So what happens in this case? They know that you are a student. They know what you've been buying. You've been buying, for example, notepads and notebooks and pens. So they know that you are very often would buy. You may be also interested in a binder. So in this case, they would suggest, okay, so you have all these things. Based on your previous purchases, maybe you would be interested in this. So they would analyze similar users, or based on their demographics, or based on their purchase history. But usually it's based on their demographics. Remember that you are registered, so they know your demographics. They know you are a female or a male, and they know what you're buying. They know usually your age, because you have all this information is registered. So they know that your age bracket, what they will offer you, is different from what they will offer me. And then the other thing would be based on your own purchases. Again, Netflix they do the same thing. If you watch The Big Bang Theory, they say that, okay, you're watching sitcoms. They would recommend, for example, Friends. If you're watching a movie by, let's say you watch The Titanic, and then you watch another movie, which is, so they might suggest two types of movies. Romantic movies or movies by Leonardo DiCaprio. It could be that you watch the movie because you want to watch a movie for basically a movie for Leonardo DiCaprio, or you watch the movie because you like romantic movies. So they will give you two suggestions. They will give you, for example, You've Got Mail, and they will give you or Love Story, or another romantic movie, and they will also give you another movie by Leonardo DiCaprio. If you pick the movie by Leonardo DiCaprio, that means your interest in the Titanic was Leonardo DiCaprio, not the romantic story. So the next movie will be another movie by Leonardo DiCaprio. This is how they define the system. Now going back to enhance, you can have it as two. So the idea was to have it either as an anonymous, because a lot of citizens would look for anonymity. They don't want to be known that they are the ones who are running the analysis, right? In this case, it's like when you have checkout as a guest. Sometimes you have checkout as a guest, right? In certain websites, you have checkout as a guest, and you have checkout using your own account. If you have using your own account, they will track that information, but they will provide you with additional services, like the recommender system. The recommender system does not work well unless you are actually registered and they keep track of your purchase history. On the other side, or on the other hand, you have anonymity. So in this case also, you can either have it as a guest. In this case, the recommender system will work based on the variables available, or let's say that every time you look at a data set, you request a data set by the city of Newark, you request a data set by the city of Kearney, of Harrison, of Jersey City. So you're looking at the area here one by one, and the analysis that you're running is always who are the top 10 PEs. Okay? In this case, if you get another city, if you download a data set or you request a payments data set for another city, the system will automatically recommend the top 10 payments. If you always run a cluster analysis to see, like, to group them, to put them in groups, it will do the same thing. It will recommend cluster analysis. That's based on your own history of analysis. That's the idea behind the recommender system. We did not, in this paper, we did not develop it, because this is a whole different story. This is a whole complicated thing, and I think June was working on one of those to develop it as a recommender system for audit apps. You know, like when you use ACL or IDEA, you have a lot of tests. An app it can be used as a test. So every test can be run as an app. Again, the idea here is that, as you can see from the overall framework, a regular citizen who has no sophisticated analytical skills can use the system efficiently and effectively to get any results they want with the help of the system. Do you have any questions about that? So that's the main contribution of this paper, is that this is a framework that would enable regular users to actually overcome the difficulty of like for example, data that's available but not knowing how to do it. It's like if I give my kids a gift, a car, without teaching them how to drive it, it's useless. If I buy them a piano and they don't know how to play, it's useless. It's gonna be like a piece of junk sitting over there, not making use. And this is the same thing that happens with data. In certain cases where they provide the data, but without helping the user actually extract any information from it. You cannot expect every user to be like you, knowledgeable in data analytics, and who would understand what the data is or what to extract from the data. You have any questions? So this is basically a mock software. It's not an actual software, but it's just a mock software where you can either log in as, for example, you can either, for example, create your own user, etc., or just log in as a guest. You request. If you have the website directly, you can add it. It's like when you have a specific terms that you can add to your search, you can make it faster to find the data, or clearer to find the data, or you can just like request the date, etc. This is the information that you initially request from the software. It will come back to you with the names of the attributes and what it means or the examples of it. So you can, if you want to run your own analysis, so this is again, it accommodates both people who are knowledgeable in analytics and people who are not. If you're not very well, basically if you don't have analytical skills, you can pick from a drop-down list. If you know what you are looking for and you want to run your own analysis, then you can actually select the ones that you want and then you can run it. After that, you decide on, so this is, you can actually select which ones you want. This is the analytics selection, this is the app, the recommended app, for example, you want the descriptive statistics and data summarization. And then you can select the format of that data. You want it in Excel. So the descriptive statistics, the data summarization, and the time series, you want all the results to be in Excel. You run the analysis. You submit it to Enhance, and then you receive the results, and then you can download it. Now again, if you are already a registered user, you will be able to store this information. So for example, later on, if you want to rerun the analysis, you won't have to re-enter all this information. It will be like stored as in your history. Any questions? Do you have any questions? Yes?
I think I just missed, is that a demo or is the software?
No, it's not an actual software. This is just a mock screen. There is no software that actually runs this. The problem is, for this one to work, you need to have the data set itself linked, which was very difficult. We tried to contact some people, but it was very difficult to actually link it to a data set or a database. You need to have access to their API, but that will work for only one specific set. Now the analysis that we run here are actually, so we have a couple, those are possible analytics that can be like part of the analytical app library. You remember like with the Brazilian data, that paper, the Armchair Auditor paper, it's basically you have to download the data and then you have to run the analysis. We did here something similar where we did that ourselves because we could not link it to the different websites.
And actually for the Brazil data set, even though in their website the data is not that easy to collect and organize and something are missing. And actually it turns out that we found actually they have a good system which contains everything, including those missing details, but it's not operated by that organization or someone else.
Precision, right? Not by the decision,
Yes.
by precision.
So maybe for some other data set, it's the same thing. Some organization, if they want to analyze or audit some data, they may have all the information or some information in a machine-readable format, but it's not open to the public.
It's not open. That's one of the problems. Actually, there was a data set that was available, or they were collecting a database of budgets and in Trenton. And we tried to contact them. Although this is available, you can download it one by one. So we tried to ask them if they would give us the data in an Access format, because in this case, we won't have to do all the work to replicate the work. They did not. They did not give it to us. They said that they have to ask for permission, which was weird because it's already publicly available. It's simply, rather than giving you that one by one, I'm giving you the whole box. No, they refused to do it. Yes.
So you mentioned earlier that some information that could be used to analyze budgets and things like this may be a case of filling out a Freedom of Information Act request and getting the information separately. So two kind of questions.
That would be one by one.
Huh?
That would be one by one.
Yeah, so
For
I have
every
two-
organization, you have to
Yeah.
file a request.
Exactly. So I have two questions about that. First of all, to the best of my knowledge, there isn't. But is there some sort of once you process that request and get the information, it's now public information. Is there a database that collects information gathered from those things that could be incorporated into the system? My guess is that there's probably not. And then my next question is, within this framework.
Just to answer that question also, technically speaking, the organization should have it on their website. In many cases, we had another paper that we published where we actually analyzed the transparency of the websites, and that how difficult is it to get to their financial statements on their website. Some of them would have it like clear from the first page. You have financial statements. Others would have it like hidden and buried, like really, really deep down, without even a link to it. So basically, you need to know exact URL to have access to it. That's technically it's available online, but good luck finding it. So this is another thing. Now, if you request, for example, the budget from that entity, they will send it to you. It doesn't mean that they will make it available. They already had it. Then why not making it available from the beginning?
So then my
Remember
question,
that many of them, they have a very rudimentary website. Again, you're thinking about the city of Newark.
Yeah.
It's a big city. But if you're looking at a small town, they might not have a webmaster. They don't know. Maybe it's someone who volunteers. They do have, sometimes they depend on volunteers. They have someone who volunteered to create the website for them, and no one is maintaining it. You don't think that they are going to actually create another web page or do that just to add something like this.
so then is there something within this framework that allows for independent user information? If I get information separate from what's on the online databases that the apps are connecting to somehow incorporate that into the system for my analysis as well. For example, if I request the Freedom of Information Act request for some additional financial information that now I have on my computer, but the app is only really searching through the online databases, is there something within the framework that
This is
allows
assumed
you to bring that
from
in?
the
or-
beginning. This is, in order for this framework to work, the data has to be available. Otherwise, if this data is not available, how are you going to actually find the attributes and recommend an app? But I understand what you're saying. You're saying, how can we actually add to the government database?
Well, not only that, but if I have independent information that's relevant to all this, is there something within this framework that
What do
will
you
allow
mean
me?
relevant to all this? This is the framework. The framework does not include the government database.
But it searches the government database.
It interacts with it, but it is not part of it. So the database
Right, but then
is not part of
it retrieves that information from the
Retrieves
internet.
that
correct?
information.
But there's nothing in the system that allows you to input additional information, is there? Like if I have
They are
some
not
factors.
adding.
For
This
example,
is-
if you have one of these municipalities that doesn't really make it available online, right? So this app may not be able to locate the governmental data that you want to analyze online. But maybe I got a copy from the office
But
that
you
I have
don't
on
manage the database. You don't manage the database. The database is managed by different entities.
Right, I understand that, but is there anything within this framework that allows you to input additional data to run analysis on?
You don't have the data. The data is not stored in your place.
But it could be.
It's like as if you're asking, like, for example, does the developer, can the developer change the code of the iPhone? Or can the developer add a feature that Apple does not add to their iPhone? No, they can't. They can add a feature to their own app, but they cannot modify your operating system. Here it's the same thing. The framework can analyze the data whatever data is available. They're not storing the data. They're not adding or deleting of the data. They don't have the framework. The framework's purpose is not to manage the database. It simply is to tap into the database and to this data repository and to run analysis.
But what if there's, so like my question is if there's data missing in that depository?
Let me put it differently. You're familiar with CompuStat, right? Okay, so when you run analysis, when you ask CompuStat for certain data, if the data is missing, you cannot add it. There is nothing
Oh, I see.
included in it where you can add it to CompuStat.
Okay.
CompuStat has to do that on their own. The same thing with Bloomberg. If you want to request some data from Bloomberg, now, if you want to run analysis on Bloomberg's terminal, it's going to run that information. It's going to run the analysis and get you the report. But if there's a report that's missing, you cannot and you find it with somewhere else. You cannot really actually input it in that because you don't manage it.
Okay.
Now, something that can be done, in this case, the user themselves, they can contact, for example, I mean, that would be a total, but it's beyond the scope of this
Yeah,
paper.
yeah.
But there could be a mechanism, an easy mechanism, where like sometimes you have requests. Let's say, for example, if you're asking for something, and then sometimes you have websites that would tell you request information. For example, if you're looking for certain information that's not available, you can add this so that they would send a request to add it to their system. But this would be a totally different framework related to how the data in the repository is created.
But it has to be published on the governmental data end for this whole
It
framework.
has to be available. It has to be available in an accessible format.
Yeah.
It doesn't work if this one is in PDF, because the apps will not be able to run on PDF. The apps will have to run on data that is like XML, that is like XBRL, if it is even CSV or text, it can run, but it cannot run on PDF. You see my point about why the Freedom of Act is Freedom of Information Act does not help with the framework itself. It helps with increasing the size of the repository, but not this one specifically.
But it doesn't really increase the size of the depository. If I'm the only one with access to it and I can't incorporate it into the app, then it's effectively not really doing too much.
No, it won't. What it can help is if there's a mechanism put by the government
That forces the information I get to be posted
that would
on the
automatically show that, okay, so if this is available, then I'm going to make it available. Still have a couple more minutes. So here, those are like just some kind of and these are possible analytics and different types of analytics, cluster analysis. You can have pattern, you can have benchmark, time series. Those are actually some of the things that we actually ran. Where you would have, for example, this was to just look at the expenditures at the different data. You can extract data specific like that. You can have descriptive statistics. What's the maximum number? What's the number of records in certain data set? How many payees do you have? What's the average payment? Stuff like that. So you can have descriptive statistics. You can run it. If you want to look at, for example, data summarization by department and fiscal year, so for example, for 2018, let's say that at Rutgers University, in 2015 or 16, how much money did Rutgers Business School spend on technology compared to law school, or compared to the School of Arts and Science, or the School of Engineering? So basically you can run it by department, by fiscal year, you can run it by program. So it depends on how deep you want it and how specific you want it. You can have, for example, you can look at time series, you can look at how the department is faring over the time. If you want to do it by vendor, how much money did we pay last year? Did we pay, for example, Rutgers, did they pay their auditor as opposed to this year, and kind of like look at it? Or if you want to look more specifically at department-wise, remember, again, this is for government. So for example, if you have the city of New Jersey, or the city of Jersey City, and then you look at, for example, how much they paid for police department, how much they paid for the fire department, how much they paid for the plow trucks, etc. You can look at it over the time. You can run on it like duplicate detection. There's actually a website specific for faulty payments and stuff like that. This is how much they pay. And like for example, you have here the same amount. You look at the date sometimes, and they are slight. So the date that was issued is a couple of days apart. But like you look at those two here, the same date, same amount, the same thing. Then why was the check paid twice? Generally speaking, this is a little bit more difficult to run if the data is not accessible in an easy way. A lot of people, they don't know how to identify duplicate payments. I mean, to you guys, it's very easy. You will immediately think of three-way matching, right? So a three-way match would look at the amount, at the date, at the vendor. But those people, a lot of people, they don't know how to do it. You can run cluster analysis, like for example, this is for the libraries. So library department, expenditures across all vendors. They want to see which publishers are paying the most. Then you look at them. In this case, let's say that you have only one big and two small. Why is it that different? Especially that you have here some big names here, like for example, Cengage. So maybe let's say that I'm Cengage in this case, and I want to get part of this amount. What I can do in this case, I can check out what they are offering, and I can compete with them. I can outbid them. And someone like I mentioned earlier, right? Like you might want to outbid them, present something that is different, that is cheaper. And this is the same thing by type. And you look at, this is an example. This is, for example, Author Armchair. That's a guy who actually, he is provider of computer services. And he's checking out the possibility. Actually, we're going to change this example a little bit in the paper. So think about it as this. So this is a guy who's trying to, like this is a company who's trying to open a new business. What you're trying to do here is you want to see if it's worth it for you to enter the market. So are there some big players who are having everything or not? And you can use this kind of information. So you want to, you know that you will be, you're a big provider, so it's not gonna be like $5,000, it's gonna be like over $100,000. And then you can look at it and see which ones can be, which ones are the top paid vendors. Now, you can look at it also from an Armchair Auditor perspective. Arthur Armchair is a citizen who wants to know or to make sure that the city is not having, the city of Austin is not allowing some kind of like monopoly. So they are not allowing a couple of vendors to take over the whole market. They are kind of allowing for possibilities for others to enter. In this case, they can actually look and see if there are only two vendors. However, there are like 100 other companies who can provide similar services, then this information might be also interesting to the press. The press can, for example, in this case, raise the issue, and others can enter this market. This is just another example. We won't have time to discuss this one. This is actually a paper where they looked at the difficulty of analyzing data. They could not analyze data because it was mostly in XBRL. They proposed. So what they did was they proposed a taxonomy. They developed a taxonomy, XBRL taxonomy for. And the problems that they found was that there's a problem with the standardized items. Like when we mentioned earlier about like safety expenditures, what does it mean? Obligation, what does it mean? It changes sometimes from one entity to the other. They had difficulty in doing that. And like for example, in a survey of 289, they reported a portion of long-term debt in 20 different ways. That's a lot. It's the same thing. It's presented in different ways. So that makes it a lot, and they reported it in different ways, not just presentation. It's much more difficult. And EMMA, which is the database where they actually keep, or where municipalities who issue bonds, they have to file their the CAFR statements. Well, they provide either ratings. Sometimes the data is very outdated, or they simply provide the data through CAFR statements. So what they did, they proposed a taxonomy. They created a taxonomy. They used it in XBRL. They standardized, of course, the taxonomy. And what they tried to do is to allow for it to be more or less to increase transparency and comparability across entities. And they used a bottom-up approach where they looked at whatever has been done and then they tried to build on top of it. They faced those challenges. Many of them, they were very, very difficult. Only 377 were converted out of 724. They started with a large number of items, and at the end, they ended up with like 234 elements. Because many of them, they are repetitive, many of them, they are similar, but this is, actually we did something similar in Excel. You look at the frequency and you pick the one that actually looks the most at those ones. And those are the ones that they did. This is where they look at the frequency of each item, and they see which one was used the most, and then they actually include it. Any questions? This is just to wrap it up and kind of to summarize it. Do you have any questions about this? I'll be sending you the assignment that you have to submit before next class. Just to ensure that you kind of at least read some of the material.